Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank all the ag groups that are here today showing their support for what we're doing across this state. I want to thank the senators and representatives that are here today and for their work. And this issue we're going to be talking about is nothing new for the state of Missouri, but it's new for all of us to go fight again to make sure we're protecting the people of this state against the overreach of the federal government. And today we're here to address another overreach of the federal government, waters of the United States. Recently, the federal government published a 514-page document of overly broad and inconsistent definitions. As you can imagine, these new rules raise more questions than they give answers for our farmers, our ranchers, and our urban and rural communities. Missourians are now forced to try to determine, better yet guess, whether ponds, drainage ditches, or other minor water features are regulated by the EPA. These new rules are unclear and unacceptable for Missourians simply trying to make a living in our communities. If the Biden administration expects us to just stand back and tolerate this federal intrusion, they are deeply mistaken. All we see from this White House is overreach after overreach. Now, our state and the development and management of our own energy, agriculture, and transportation industries are the targets. Missouri farmers, ranchers, and small business owners across this state work hard and they follow the rules. But more burdens and more cost are the theme of this White House, and we must fight back. Recently, I joined with my fellow Republican governors to stand against this administration and seek a reversal of this disastrous policy. We've called out the hypocrisy of this action, especially as the United States Supreme Court currently weighs whether the federal government even has the authority to make these rules. It's hard to believe that the federal government would be so concerned with attacking hardworking Americans that they would publish these rules before even understanding their legal authority. Inefficiency and ineffectiveness are what they are selling, but out here in the middle of the country, we aren't buying. Regulations regarding the waters of the United States are nothing new, but this weaponization of them is. Unfortunately, this fight is all too familiar for Missouri agriculture communities and business industries across our state. But we've always stood up and fought back. And today, we're happy to do it again on the behalf of Missouri agriculture, business, and industry development in our state. Because the last thing our farmers, ranchers, and business owners should have to deal with is the overreach of the federal government. My office fully supports Attorney General Bailey's lawsuit against this administration as we fight back against their radical climate agenda. This state's lawsuit will seek to protect Missouri farmers, ranchers, and businesses all across our state, and to achieve clearer guidance and more common sense definitions on what regulatory waters actually are and should be. Allowing federal bureaucrats thousands of miles away to regulate private ponds, lakes, and temporary waterways is inefficient, unnecessary, and frankly, counterproductive to achieving a cleaner environment. As a farmer myself, it's ridiculous for anyone to think that we don't care about the environment. It's our livelihood. In fact, modern farming techniques utilize some of the most sustainable practices in our history. And while we understand more can always be done to improve, it shouldn't be done on the backs of family farmers and small business owners. Communities across our state are lucky to have Attorney General Bailey fighting on their behalf, and we know he'll do everything he can to support them, fight for them, and win for them. He has the full support of my office in this fight, and we look forward to providing Washington, D.C. a little Missouri common sense. I want to thank all of you again for being here today, and with that, I would like to introduce the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey.
I want to thank Governor Parson for his leadership on ag issues, and I want to thank our ag leaders who are gathered here today in order to support this important effort. On December 30th, 2022, President Biden tried to sneak an EPA rule through the process that would redefine what constitutes the waters of the United States under the Clean Water Act. This move was senseless because there's a case pending before the United States Supreme Court that will likely interpret this statute and provide clarity for both landowners and the EPA. Within days of taking office, ag leaders from across the state gathered for a roundtable at my office in order to discuss this federal overreach and the appropriate state response. President Biden's rush to issue this rule is nothing short of a land grab. It is an attempt to turn Missouri agricultural land over to federal unelected bureaucrats. Federal unelected bureaucrats at the EPA, and we're not going to let it happen. No one knows better how to protect Missouri farmland than Missouri farmers. Missouri farmers would suffer under President Biden's rule because it would limit their use of the land and also subject them to EPA approval under a vague and overly broad regulatory scheme. Farmers and landowners should not have to pay experts and attorneys to fight with the EPA to be allowed to use their own land. Agriculture is a $93.7 billion industry in the state of Missouri. There are 95,000 farms in Missouri. The agricultural industry employs nearly 460,000 people in this state. This issue is important to all Missourians because it impacts Missouri people's legacies and livelihoods. I'm proud to partner with 23 other like-minded attorneys general in this fight, and we're asking the court to issue an injunction to put a stop to this new rule, and I'm confident in the success of our efforts to protect Missourians from this federal overreach. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone's leadership on this issue, and at this time I'll turn it over to the Missouri Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. Governor Parson, thank you. We've had this conversation many times about federal overreach under the Clean Water Act. And I want to thank my fellow partners who are here today. Since the Obama-era 2015 rule, Missouri has led on this issue in pushing back against federal government overreach. The group that you see today includes agriculture, small business, home builders, transportation. We in Missouri are united from the standpoint that we know how to care for our water and our land, and we can make those decisions best when they are closest to the people. I want to make it clear, for those of us that are involved in agriculture, our livelihood depends on healthy soils and clean water. We support the Clean Water Act, but the ambiguity of where the jurisdictional lines lie has created confusion for landowners and small business owners for years. Unfortunately, this uncertainty is due to ever-changing rulemakings and guidance documents that are issued by the federal agencies to redefine the scope of the Clean Water Act. The new rule allows the EPA and the Army Corps to assert jurisdiction over ephemeral drainages, such as ditches, and yes, low spots on our farms and ranches. The use of the significant nexus test allows the agencies to aggregate waters together, and the rule provides the agencies the latitude to reach whatever conclusion they please. It is impossible for any farmer or rancher to know if a jurisdictional ephemeral feature is on their property without taking the expense of hiring consultants, attorneys, and engineers to help navigate the process. Considering these features as jurisdictional waters opens up the potential for regulation of everyday activities on our farm in which we move soil and apply products to produce the crops and the livestock that are the bounty of this nation. Farmers and ranchers are frustrated by the rulemaking process and feeling like we're not being heard. And as you've just heard from our leadership, we have a pending Supreme Court case in Sackett versus EPA that has been litigated for 10 years, folks. Our message is very simple: no WOTUS before SCOTUS. As we think about this path forward, it is critical that we maintain a united front That's the front that the Attorney General, along with 23 other state attorneys general, are leading. American Farm Bureau, along with our national partners, are pursuing litigation as well. And yes, we have allies in Congress that are going to use that process as well to push back on what is federal government overreach. We can sum it all up, folks, by the folks here today. We can say that we all support clean water, but we must have clear rules, and that's what this fight is about. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to take questions right now regarding the votes. So if you have questions for Mr. Hawkins, or any, actually any of the three will be fine. Thank you. Okay.
I have two questions. I'm Kara Hart. I'm a reporter for Brownfield Agriculture News. I cover the state of Missouri, and we've been closely watching this issue. My questions are for the Attorney General. If this Biden administration's definition of WOTUS is not the correct definition, what is the correct definition?
Well, I think to answer that question, we need the answer from the Supreme Court first, because we need to understand what the agency's rulemaking authority is before we jump to a rule. At the end of the day, the Biden rule that came out on December 30th is overly broad and it's vague, and it leaves the determination as to whether waters are navigable or not to the subjective determination of unelected federal bureaucrats. That standard is always, any standard that gives power to unelected federal bureaucrats and is subjective in nature is always going to be a problem from a legal perspective.
My second question, we had a chance to visit with EPA Administrator Michael Regan and ask him about the timing of the Waters of the United States rule, and here's what he told us. The release happened before Sackett versus EPA because there are aspects of the rule the agency wanted to get on record for agriculture, but they also wanted the Supreme Court to make its decision based on an updated rule, not any hypotheticals or rules that existed prior. How would you respond to that?
And I'm sorry, did you say that the EPA said that they want SCOTUS to issue an opinion based on their rule?
They said, EPA said that they released their definition before the court case because there are aspects of the rule the agency wanted to get on record for agriculture.
Well, I got whiplash from the different rules and the changing regulatory regime. So pencils down until SCOTUS gives us a decision, and then we can promulgate a rule based on what the law actually is as provided by the United States Supreme Court.
Attorney General, I had a question related to this just briefly. This lawsuit you're referring to, is this the same lawsuit that was filed last Thursday in North Dakota?
This is the lawsuit that is filed in North Dakota that's being led by West Virginia and 22 other state attorneys general, and I'm proud to be leading the legal effort on behalf of the state of Missouri and joining with like-minded attorney generals in that fight.
All right. Is there a particular action related to the lawsuit that's happening today?
Not to my knowledge. We will stay on top of it. My staff monitors the suit and is in constant coordination and contact with the litigation team that is in court on that issue.
For Attorney General, do you expect this lawsuit to impact the 3 flood mitigation studies that the state is partnering on with the Army Corps of Engineers?
Well, what I expect this lawsuit to do is get an injunction to stop implementation of the current Waters of the United States EPA rule that was promulgated on December 30th of 2022. We've got, just like Farm Bureau said, we've got to put pencils down and stop this regulatory overreach and stop the ever-changing regulatory regime until the United States Supreme Court gives us a decision. So that's the paramount issue right now. And then we can adjust our legal strategy and adjust fire based on what the Supreme Court gives us.
Any other questions regarding voice? Any other questions for Mr. Hawkins? Okay. Attorney General, we're going to take a few questions for him. Kurt.
Concerning Kim Gardner, what evidence would you present in your filing that you've said you will file? And when will you file that? Where will you file it? And have you spoken with the St. Louis City prosecutor?
My office has been in contact with the Circuit Attorney's Office in the past weeks. I'll tell you that this is about the rule of law and about justice for me. And there are a number of issues that we see coming from the City of St. Louis and the Circuit Attorney's Office that all establish neglect in office, and it is time for her to resign and for the rule of law and justice to prevail. We're hopeful she'll make the right decision, and if not, we're prepared to move forward with legal action shortly after noon today. City of St. Louis, 22nd Judicial Circuit.
Okay, and
My question's for Governor Mike Parson. Oh, okay.
Any more questions for Attorney General?
For this, excuse me, for this removal of office process, how long would that process take for her to actually be removed from office if she doesn't resign today?
Well, the court controls that timeline. So we will present our evidence and we'll try to get our day in court as quickly as possible because, again, this is about the rule of law. And the people of the city of St. Louis and the people of eastern Missouri and across the state deserve clarity and they deserve justice in our criminal justice system. So we will move as swiftly as the process allows us to reach the right result, which is that the circuit attorney is no longer in office in the coming days, weeks, and months.
I've heard that this may take months, if not years. Is that accurate?
We don't anticipate it'll take that long. Again, we will be moving as expeditiously as possible to reach the right result. And we're hopeful that she will make the right decision and resign before noon today, as called for in my demand.
Yeah, Kim Gardner has at various times suggested she's being targeted because of her minority status. I mean, what would you say in response to her if she says, hey, they're just going after me because I'm a black female in office? What do you say to that?
Nothing could be less true. Nothing could be more false. This is about the rule of law and about justice. Instead of protecting victims, which is her obligation, she's creating more victims by neglect in office.
All right, we'll take one more for Andrew.
Question for you. Her office has also alleged that judges aren't doing their job. What responsibility do judges have if a defendant is constantly violating bond to revoke that bond? That's one of the things we've seen come out of her office in the last 24 hours.
Well, I'm going to leave that to the judiciary. I'm a litigant as in an adversarial process in the judiciary, the same that the circuit attorney is. And so my focus is on the circuit attorney and her neglect in office. And she has until noon today to resign or face removal proceedings shortly thereafter.
Two kind of questions real quick. First off, if she does resign, are you in charge of appointing someone to that position? And then my next question, what are your thoughts? Should she resign? We haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, I definitely think there's plenty of evidence right now what I believe that she is not doing what she needs to be doing as the prosecutor of St. Louis City. And I believe there's not just my opinion. I think when you look at a record that's been consistent with violent crime in that area, with the issues they face, this is nothing new. It's just a matter that's probably brought it all to the top. And I think there's many people in St. Louis right now that are calling for her to resign and to try to move on, to be able to move on in the city of St. Louis. So, yes, that would be my process, appointing another prosecuting attorney for that area.
What kind of appointee are you looking for? Does that person need to be a Republican, a Democrat, from the city, from anywhere? What's the profile?
Well, there's a process will be in place. We'll work with the city administrators up there. We'll be talking to the mayor's office. We'll be talking about different people. And it'll be the same record I've continued to do since I've been governor, appointing people in those positions. I'm going to find the most qualified candidate and try to put them in that position and do what they take an oath to do. That'll be the first priority of that as we go through that selection process. But again, we've got to go through that process. And as of this time right now, she has not resigned. So we'll just wait and see how that comes out.
I just want to clarify Emily's question. She had asked, do you think she should resign? Do you think she should resign?
I do think she should resign. I think with everything that's happened and it continues, I think it's more of a pattern. It continues to happen, you know, and it's unfortunate that we have somebody in that position, whether it's a prosecutor or one of the young ladies asked about the judges a while ago. Look, we are public servants. We're elected officials. All of us are. I am, they are. And if you say you're going to do your job and take an oath to that, you should be doing that very thing. So if the judges are failing, they should be called out for not doing their jobs also. And we plan to look into that and see where that's at, you know. Are they doing what they need to be doing? Look, some guy that can walk out of bond 42 different times, there's a failure in the system. And we need to first admit there's a failure to that, and we need to figure out how we're going to change that. And I would also say sometimes people would say, well, this is a St. Louis issue. You know, I will tell you it's not a St. Louis issue. Thousands upon thousands of Missouri go to that city every day, just like this young lady go there from a different state to come in here. This is about the people of Missouri, and it affects all of us, just not one small region of the state. Okay.
Piggybacking off what you just said, that young lady was a tourist. We talk about St. Louis being an economic engine in this part of the state, biggest city in the state. What is your reaction to what happened to this tourist, and how do we continue to attract conventions and visitors to our city when we have things like this happening?
Look, to be perfectly honest about this, it's one of the questions I always have to answer when I go outside the state of Missouri, And St. Louis is such a great city. It has so many positive things going on, but you highlight a violent crime. And all these major cities, a lot of these major cities, I won't say all of them, but a lot of them, are going to have to do things differently than they've ever done it before to fight violent crime. You cannot let convicts out all the time. You can't do people that are bad people and let them out on the streets all the time and expect them to do anything differently when there is no accountability for them or the courts or the prosecutors. Again, we all take a part of this because it's our state. We want that region. We want people to go there and feel safe. The number one issue, no matter where you live in this country, no matter whether you live in rural Missouri or cities or wherever it might be, people want to feel safe when they walk down the street. They want their kids to be able to go out and be safe. And you got to take bad people off the street. So we got to quit doing what we're doing right now because it's not working. And this is a perfect example of why.
Yeah, Governor Parson, is there precedent across the state or in the history of Missouri for a removal process like this? Is there something that the state is looking at in its past?
Well, I think that's always been on the table as part of the process if we ever want to use that, and I think that's more the Attorney General's decision to do that and what we feel is the best thing for the people of Missouri, and I think that's exactly why he's went forward with what he is. So, look, these processes don't happen very often. They're unique, to say the least, but it seems like since I've been governor, there's always seems like a first for everything. But I will tell you this, at the end of the day, we're going to do the right thing for the people of Missouri. The Attorney General, I know, is going to do the same thing, and I'm going to work with him, hand in hand to make sure we do the right thing for the people of this state. Thank you all very much.